We often miss those passages post-Christmas because at least here at the People's Church, we typically read Matthew or Luke on Christmas Eve, and I don't mean this insultingly, but the week after Christmas is usually a pretty low week. People are visiting family, they're out of town. We often will just do a lessons and carols service, and so we don't always focus on these verses right afterward that introduce us to Simeon and Anna, these two older people who've been waiting in the temple to see this child. And then they're dismissed, and we have the image that they walk off into the sunset, having finally realized their life's potential, that they would interact with their Savior. And that was all that they wanted. Now, I haven't seen that, but I certainly have seen the joy on parents' and grandparents' faces when they first meet that child that they have been longing for so long. I've seen it when we recognize marriages that finally come together. We're so overwhelmed because we see our child or our friend have so much love and faith and devotion to another person, and we can't help but cry out, "My God, this is beautiful." We see those moments, but they are few and far between because unfortunately they're peppered with the opposite, with those parents who long to have a child, and yet conception is such a difficulty. For those who have lost children, for those who mourn in silence, our culture doesn't seem to grab onto those moments in ways that allow us to grieve together so that we can long for something, and when it doesn't happen, to be there in compassionate response. Those are hard moments. And I think those difficult times make the very joyful ones that much more divine, profound, and miraculous. Not just when they happen to our own children and to ourselves, but to the people around us that we know and that we love. The start of the new year has so much anticipation and joy. For our children who are not here today, this is the week of weeks. It's the lead up to Christmas, which is amazing for a 10-year-old and an 8-year-old. They still have such joy and magic, and they could not be happier. But the week just kind of goes up from there. It gets better and better. They have time that we all spend together playing with those toys, and then it leads up to last night. We have a tradition in my family that the children go and spend New Year's Eve with their Nana and Grandpa, my parents. And I think my parents look forward to it just as much as the kids. They buy all sorts of junk food. They do all sorts of things they normally wouldn't do, both my parents and the kids. You watch them throwing all the rules out the window, and they can get away with anything, and it's as though everyone's in on the gag, too, and all four of them just delight in this night. And they all think they're pulling one over on Rachel and me, and we don't know what they're doing, and we're going to have to suffer without them on New Year's Eve. We're okay. But they look forward to it with such anticipation and joy and expectation. It's fun to watch the faces. They're excited for the days leading up to it, and I miss that feeling. I miss wanting something so bad, wanting to hear, wanting to see, wanting to experience, because at this point in my life, most things are accessible. I am privileged beyond all sorts of definition of that word. I can do most things. The world gives me preferential treatment. And I think because of that, I take it for granted 23 hours out of the day. Instead, I anticipate things that I'm nervous about. I worry at night. I don't stay up at night waiting for Christmas morning. I stay up worrying about work that needs to be done, or someone who's sick, a loss of a job, a worry for a neighbor. Those are the things that keep me going, and that's a very different type of waiting. Simeon experienced a little bit of both, with that nervous expectation of hope within a community that was in the midst of just fear and dread. Remember, at that time, Israel was an occupied land. They were oppressed by their own religious leaders and elites, and they were also oppressed by the Romans. The people themselves had nothing to look forward to. Moreover, because of that sense of hopelessness, their young men had started acting as revolutionaries, and they were striving for change and being mercilessly hunted down in the process. Whole generation of young men were being killed because they didn't think they had anything else to do. They had to fight back. And Simeon, this older man, is watching then as the average Hebrew family had worries about what would happen next because of the taxes, the lack of work, their safety and security, the hope that their families would be able to grow up and just live. Simeon watched that. Anna watched that for 80 years. That's a hard life to live. Yet in the midst of that hopelessness, Simeon is hounded at night by the hope that he will see the Messiah who will redeem them. In spite of all the worries, there's that one thing to hold on to. And it seems like each and every day he goes to the temple thinking, this is the day I'm going to see it. And while in today's passage we have the joyful resolution of that, there were weeks upon weeks that he walked into the temple thinking, this is the day it's going to be better. And it wasn't. I know many of us have walked into this sanctuary before as well, thinking, I need something. I need to feel better. I need to feel hopeful. I need to feel love. And I would love to say that every time you walk in, you've had that. But the reality is something far from that. And it's hard to keep waiting and keep believing and keep wanting. Simeon, though, back to him, goes into the temple and he sees this young couple, kind of like Rob and Kirby. No offense to put you on the spot here today, but the idea of bringing in your firstborn son to have him dedicated and baptized is like the easiest illustration for this passage in the entire world. We see the young couple walk in with their beautiful baby boy, and everyone lights up. They're so excited, as we all are when we see the baptism of a child. We see a nervous young man, a first-time father, trying to make sense of what has just happened. There were angels and shepherds, and these wise men dropped off gifts. I can only imagine what he thinks the next week is going to look like. And then there's the newly delivered wife who has got to still be processing all that goes through the mind of a new mother. What am I supposed to do now? That's great that he's promised to be the Messiah, the Savior of the world, but I still have to nurse him and change him and protect him and teach him and love him. That couple walks in, and Simeon rushes over to him, this old man with tears in his eyes and joy in his heart, and he says, "My God, the promise you made has come true." And then he gives all of these beautifully poetic words, and he picks the baby up out of their arms. I don't know what gives people the right to take someone else's baby, but I admit I've watched this one. Even people who come over when our children were little in strollers, or if they're on one of those wonderful Baby Bjorn thing, they come and they touch your child. I don't go up and just touch random strangers and say, "You look beautiful," and pet their heads. I might do it today, though, so just be ready. Anything's possible in New Year. But they do. They go over, and it's amazing to watch people nowadays who are so excited when they see a baby. Well, Simeon goes beyond that. He actually takes the baby out of their arms, and he holds the baby up, "My sovereign Lord." And he says these most amazing things. Think of the first time you held a child who means something to you. Your first son or daughter, your grandchild, your niece, your neighbor, someone that you love, your sibling even. When we first meet that child, there is so much hope. It's the beginning of something. We see in them hope for the future. We see in their smile something that just makes us delight, and we want to touch their head, and we want to smile back, and we want to get them to talk to us, and we want that child to have this clean slate, and we want this child to grow up in a world that doesn't have hate and war and famine, and we want everything in that moment. And it is profound, and it is hard to put the words together, so instead we say, "Oh, you look so cute," because we don't know what else we're supposed to do with a baby. There is so much in that moment as Simeon holds on to the baby Jesus, and so much hope. My friends, it is a terrible thing to live without hope. And I think the world needs to see something on us this first of the year. that is better than longing for a year gone by or thinking things that will be better than they were last year, but still bemoaning the past mistakes that we all have made. No, we need to demonstrate real, honest-to-goodness hope that doesn't live in the past, but it anticipates the future. We need to leave this place and be in such an inspired state that we can't help but bring that same type of joy onto the faces of people we see. I hope people see us and they think of fresh newborn babies, that they can't help but smile, and that we feel that type of joy and love.